Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome again to Career Expert Roundtable. I am Bill, the company's expert, and with me, as always, is Abby from Life Work Balance. And this is our bi-weekly live stream where we answer your questions. This is going out simultaneously live on my channel and Abby's channel. And if you are watching us from any of those locations, you should be able to see a chat box of some kind. Get in the chat if you have questions about job search, hiring, careers, networking, job interviews, all that kind of stuff. Ask it, and we will do our best to help you out. How you doing, Abby?
I'm doing well. This is exciting because it's our first live stream of 2026.
Yeah.
So we are excited to answer anyone's questions if you got them. So like Bill said, put them in the chat. He's streaming on his YouTube channel. I'm streaming on my YouTube channel. And I've also got my Twitch stream up and going. So if you're watching from any of those three locations, you should be able to pull up the chat or the comment box and put your questions in there directly. I wanted to start us off with a little note about how many applications you should essentially be submitting to expect some serious results. So I follow they're an organization that you can hire to you can hire them to basically submit applications for you. And then they've got other things like coaching on interviewing and all that stuff. And they had a success story that they wanted to share to all of their subscribers for their newsletter. And it was someone who started working with them for a total of 3 months. And there's some interesting statistics here. So I just want to double check my math as I'm talking. So they hired this company to submit applications for them. The applications were tailored applications. So they tailored their resume, they tailored their cover letters, their responses to application questions using AI. And this person also submitted their own applications. So over this course of 3 months, this individual submitted 200 applications on their own. And then the organization submitted 900 applications for this on behalf of this person. So doing the math right, that's 1,100 applications in 3 months. Now, if you were to just say that 1,100 applications in 3 months, let's divide that by 12 because we're assuming there's 4 weeks in each month. Let's just double check my math. 1,100 divided by 12 is 91.67. So that's about 90 to 100 applications per month. And then we'll divide that by 5, let's just say, for 5 days for each of those weeks. That's about 18 to 19 applications a day. So that seems like a lot of applications to me.
How many did you say in a month? 90?
Yes, 90 to 100-ish, 91. So I did
90 to 100, okay.
Yeah, just 91.667 divided by 5. So 5 days per week.
Okay, so 5 work days, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Got it. So that's in a week. That's in a month or in a week?
You know, I'm not doing my math right, am I? That is in. So I did
90 in a month. Then, if you divide that by how many weekdays in a? Here we go. So 90 in a month divided by 20, right? On average, right? So it'd be 4.5.
There we go. That makes a lot more sense. Thank you. So 4.5. We'll just round it up. We'll say 5 applications a day, 5 days a week, which is seemingly doable. If you are full-time job searching, you can submit in 3 months about 1,100 applications in that 3-month period. Now, this person's success story was that they got 20 first-round interviews. So 1,100 applications, 20 first-round interviews.
And that was over 3 months?
Over 3 months.
Yeah. Okay, so 20 divided by 3 months. Okay.
Yep. So that's, if they had those 20 first-round interviews within the total of those 3 months, then, that's 7-ish interviews a month, which seems like a pretty good statistic. Now, that's if you are job searching full time. If you have the ability to submit quality tailored applications, if you're job searching full time, then those are the types of results you can expect. Now, I don't know how many people are truly job searching full time. a lot of people are probably also working while also job searching. So the numbers might be a little bit reduced then, but that's kind of a good indicator of what the, I guess, expectations should be around how long your job search should or could take based on the amount of effort that you're putting into this whole process. So 5 quality tailored applications a day seems doable if you're doing this full time. That then gets you the results of 20 first round interviews if your applications are truly quality. And then that puts you in a position to where you can kind of negotiate and use those various, let's just hope that you have more than one offer. You can use those to leverage the others and then get the best offer possible for you that is with an organization that you want to work for, that's the best fit for you. I think a lot of people, like, those numbers are big. Those are big numbers. From a, big picture perspective, 1,100 applications in 3 months. It might not seem doable to people, but when you break it down to that daily amount, that seems pretty doable to me. But people have to have that commitment to the quality applications.
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, it seems like, okay, so 5 applications a day, and that's fully tailored. So presumably custom resume,
Yep.
which is a subset of your master resume,
Yep.
probably rewritten by a chatbot in part to match the lingo and the requirements on a job description.
Yep.
Plus possibly a custom cover letter,
Mm-hmm.
presumably also mainly generated by a chatbot, essentially based on your, like, what would you base your cover letter on? Is it also based on your resume, or would you have a separate master sort of document that you would include? I guess you could do it a couple of different ways, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so I have a couple videos on how to write cover letters. I think that cover letter should have 3 main parts. Your introduction, where you kind of introduce yourself, you let them know what position you're applying to so that it's clear that this cover letter is specifically for that position. And then you kind of butter up the reader. You make them feel good about why you're applying to this role. And then you go into the body of your cover letter, which could be 1 or multiple paragraphs, where you're describing your experience and your background and what makes you a good fit for the position. And then the closing paragraph is where you reiterate your enthusiasm for the role. You kind of let them know that you're going to keep the ball in your court. So if you don't hear from them by a certain date, you'll follow up, or you'll gladly be available for an interview, something like that. And so what I usually recommend doing is describing that layout, the introduction, what you want in it, the body, what you want in that, the closing, what you want in that, to an AI platform. And then you can copy the job posting and your resume and see what it generates for you as a first draft. And so,
see, my gut feeling is that, like, if you were, like, as you said, if you're job searching full time, you would be able to do probably more than 5 a day, right? I mean, that doesn't seem like if you're using AI tools to assist you, I mean, you could do a lot more than 5 in a day, right? Especially if you've been doing this for a while and you got a bit of a system down and it's more like an assembly line kind of thing.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, I would completely agree. And I think that what you'll also probably start to realize that you're applying to certain themed jobs. So for example, my background is in human resources. I also have a background in research and development and training and development. So those are 3 different industries, so to speak. And I might have a very similar resume for each of those different industries that is also different from those other 2. My training and development resume is going to be different from my research and development resume. But my research and development resumes that I'm using to apply to research and development jobs will all be very similar. So once you have your themed industry specific resume, then there will be very small tweaks to that document that then also speeds up the process. So if I'm a software engineer and I'm only applying to software engineering jobs, then that's kind of like my industry resume. And I'm going to have to make very small tweaks to that resume as overall to apply to software engineer jobs. Now, if I'm applying to healthcare or related jobs and software engineer jobs, those are 2 very different 2 different industries. And so those resumes will likely look different. But again, the healthcare resume will look similar for all of the applications compared to that software resume. So once you've got the themed resume down, then the overall tailoring process should be relatively quick, especially if you utilize programs like ChatGPT or Grok or any other AI platform to help identify what some of those keywords and phrases might be that are really important to highlight for your resume.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, code with kumbayage is here, and someone says customizing cover letters takes a frustrating amount of time. Now, this is where I would say, well, if that's the case for you, first of all, you're absolutely right. If you were doing this manually, like in the good old days, right, before AI,
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. But the thing is, I would argue it takes a prohibitive amount of time, especially considering how little response rates you get for the typical job application. Uh, in order to do this in this day and age, I highly recommend, you develop some sort of an assembly line thinking here. And like Abby was just talking about, you use chatbots like ChatGPT to help do a lot of the heavy lifting. It doesn't mean that it creates it for you. It just means that you give it your sort of information and then it rephrases it into a custom letter that's tailored to that particular job opportunity, right? That's the idea. So if you're doing this and you're letting things like ChatGPT do the heavy lifting, it should no longer take you a frustratingly long amount of time. You should be able to apply for well over 5 jobs in a day, customizing them. You should be doing like what, 20, I would think, like easily.
Easily.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the thing. That's what these tools can do. The other thing is when you consider that more often than not, you're on the receiving end, it's going to a computer that's using AI to filter it. So I mean, you're not writing it for a human as the first thing that's going to read it. It's going to be a computer, right? So you know what I mean? Like that's even more reason to use these tools at your disposal.
Yep. And if you're watching this from my channels, I just put in the chat 2 videos that I have on cover letters that you can watch. So one of them is just how to write a cover letter. And then the other one is how to use AI to tailor your resume and essentially your cover letter as well. And so you can use that as inspiration to start to create your own cover letters using AI platforms. But yes, once you start to use these tools to get yourself at least a rough draft that's tailored, then you can spend an additional 5 to 10 minutes per document just tweaking it, honing it, and making it sound like you rather than like a, chatbot and an AI platform. And there are some things like that are tells that it is AI generated. But if you just think of it as your first draft rather than your final draft, and you put your own personal spin on it and correct some language that you might not normally use and correct quantifiable metrics and things like that, then it can start to feel more human than artificial.
Absolutely. We have another comment here. SuperTap says, how much time does a hiring manager spend reading a person's resume? Do they actually read or are they skimming?
Now, skimming. That's the short answer and the easy answer. To dive a little bit more into the research behind this, there is a study where the researchers tracked the eye movement of people reviewing resumes. And they determined that during the first review of a resume by a human, the human spends about 6 seconds looking at that document. So it's not a lot of time. So this is why your resume is actually such a critical document. You want to make sure that your resume is tailored specifically to the job that you're applying to, because the reviewer, the hiring manager, the recruiter, whoever it might be, can easily tell if this is a generic resume or a tailored resume. If it's generic, they're not going to spend much time on it because they can tell you didn't spend much time on the application process. If it's more tailored to the position and the organization, then they'll spend a little bit more time reading through the information on your document. The other thing that you have to remember is the length of your document. So if they're going to be spending 6 seconds looking at your resume for the first time and you have a 5-page document, that is not going to work well for you when it comes to what information they're going to look at and retain. They probably will only look at the first, maybe second page if it's 5 pages long. So they're going to skip most of the information in your document. And then what you've included on your first and maybe second page also will determine if they decide if you're a good fit or not. So if you've got a really long professional summary, that's a paragraph worth of information, they're going to just skim through it and not even read the whole thing. If you have a list of skills in like a table on the first page of your resume, they're just going to, again, maybe even skip over it and just go to your professional experience section. So you want to make sure that the format and layout of your resume makes it easy for the reader to get as much information as possible, as quickly as possible during that first review.
Absolutely. It's, in a way, it's similar to the tagline on LinkedIn. Like if you have a LinkedIn profile and you're on LinkedIn, when you go to your page, the first thing on the top of your page is your name, right? But directly below it, there's a field. It's called, I think it's called a tagline, right? I'm not sure what it's called.
Your headline.
But your headline. Okay, so it's basically a phrase where you can enter. And now a lot of people, what they do is they put their current job title in there, right? So if you're working as a customer support specialist, you would say, your name, Bill, in my case, Bill Todd, customer support specialist. That's who you are, right? Now,
and
really
by LinkedIn.
Yeah. And it's really like a summary, like just a summary in a phrase, right? Now, when you think of that statistic that Abby was saying about, hiring managers, they take like 6 seconds to scan a resume on average when they're physically looking at it. Essentially you're looking at the equivalent of like a tagline, maybe one or two other pieces of information before you make an immediate decision. Is this something that I'm going to read more of, or is this something I'm going to put aside? Right. Yeah. So for example, let's say for people who, you have like a career path. So you've had several jobs maybe, but they've all been in the same industry, in the same role, maybe a progression, right? I don't know, mortgage specialist, personal banker, and then senior mortgage specialist, or then, manager of the mortgage department, like whatever, something like that, right? Like it's kind of a progression. So, when somebody gets your resume, they're going to try and make an instant decision about you in about 6 seconds. And what's the most important information that you want to convey to them? You could say, well, I'm applying for the role of the senior mortgage specialist. I have 5 years working in the senior mortgage specialist role for a well-known company, a well-known bank or something. So like if you just had like maybe the equivalent of one sentence or possibly 2 sentences to communicate about you, that, the goal here is to get them to go, okay, this person has potential. I'm going to read more because they might be the one, right? What would you say? What's like, if you can condense all this stuff down to 1 or 2 sentences, what's it going to be that's going to convince them to look at you more seriously? So everyone should have a basic idea of what that is when you apply for a specific job. And it's going to come from a combination of like what you have, but more importantly, what they said they're looking for, what they consider to be important. So that's the material that you would consider putting front and center on your resume when you're creating a tailored resume to apply for that job. Like, what is that? Put that front and center, and it makes them just want to read more, to now be interested in maybe some more of the details.
Yes. And this is why having specifically your tailored resume is so important, because they're going to skim over it and they want to make sure that they can understand the value that you're going to bring to the position and the organization as quickly as possible. And so if you have, 5 pages worth of information, they are going to have to spend a lot of time and effort digging through that document to determine what value you're going to provide to them. So if you specifically tailor your resume to be 1, maybe 2 pages long, then you have to choose the most relevant, impactful, valuable background and education and experience you have to this role. And I think this is the big paradigm shift that people have to experience when it comes to creating their resumes. Many times we write our resumes to show off what we're really proud of. We're thinking this is a document to showcase all of the great things that I've done. That's not actually the purpose of a resume. The purpose of a resume is to catch the eye of the person who's going to hire you next. So you need to actually present your information based off of what is important and what's in it for them if they hire you. Not what is in it for you, not what you're most excited about or what you're most proud of that you've accomplished, but what is most relevant to the reader who's going to make the choice to bring you on for an interview and ultimately into their team, their department, their organization.
Absolutely. Let's get down to, we got another question here. Constantin, that's a familiar name. Do you think cover letters are an outdated concept? I absolutely do. But what I think is irrelevant, if certain employers, they want them, certain people go by them, other people don't. Other people ask for them, but only as a formality. And I'm a bit cynical about these things. So I would predict that there are a lot of employers that ask it purely because they are trying to filter candidates out by effort. So they're going to get you to do all this stuff, not because they need it, but because the reasoning is that only the most serious candidates that actually care about getting this specific job will jump through all these hoops and do all this stuff. And that kind of is a way of filtering it before it even gets to us looking at, the applicants, right?
Yes.
So I'm sure we see all kinds out there.
And I love cover letters. I, as a recruiter, as a hiring manager, as an interviewer, I love cover letters. And there's the spectrum of people. I'm on one end of saying that I absolutely love them. And there's the other end of the spectrum where people are like, I absolutely hate them and I'll never look at them. But to me, a well-written cover letter is what really separates out the people who truly want the position versus those who are just going through the motions and mass applying to jobs. If you look at a cover letter, you can also tell how much effort someone has put into it. Many times I work with people who are initially submitting cover letters that are very generic, very vague. They're short. It's like, to whom it may concern. I'm writing to inquire about applying to the position X, Y, and Z with this organization. You will see based off a review of my resume. Yeah, you will see based off a review of my resume that I have the skills and expertise to do this job well. Sincerely, so-and-so. Boring. Like, no, that is the type of cover letter that indicates to me that you haven't put a ton of effort into the application.
Yeah, because you could use that to every single job you apply for. That's the thing. It's generic, right? It's not tailored whatsoever.
No. And it doesn't give me any additional information. You just wasted my time while I look at this document. So instead, if you use your resume as like the hook to get people interested in looking further into your application, because you've given some really interesting bullet points with each of your experiences, or there's something unique that sets you apart that is actually specific to the role that you're applying to, then I, as the recruiter, the hiring manager, or the interviewer, I'm going to then dive deeper into your application to see what else you've got in there. If you have a cover letter that then tells me a story about why you want to apply to this specific position with my organization, and you make me feel good reading about you working with us potentially and the value that you can provide to us, that's just going to make me more eager to interview you, which then ultimately can increase your chances of getting that first round interview, if not further interviews after that.
Like if somebody said in their cover letter, I know that you as a company or whatever, I know that you do this work in this area, and it's something unique that you do that's different from your competitors or something. Mm-hmm. That's not a boilerplate cover letter. That's somebody who knows specifically about this company. They care enough to write that tailored kind of thing. And I mean, if they're making a great case for themselves at the same time, that's an added bonus. But it shows that that signals that this person actually cares about this job. Mm-hmm. They're not just applying to 10,000 jobs with a common kind of thing, and they don't even remember what they applied to because they don't even care at the time. Employers want candidates that care about this particular job. They don't just want people that want a job. They want a candidate that wants this specific job. So whatever
with this
you
specific
can do,
organization and this specific department and this specific manager.
Exactly. So whatever you can do to signal that, right? like for example, if you sent a cover letter in and it's like obviously written by AI, it's,
Yeah.
you know, it's totally generic. There's nothing that's particular to this employer or this role. It's just absolutely generic. Um, that's a signal that this candidate doesn't give a rat's ass about this job. They're just applying to everything and anything. And so that's an automatic fail. You know, like even if they have the stuff, you know, if I was the hiring manager, I probably wouldn't pick them. The other thing is, like Abby kind of indicated, is going above and beyond can also signal that you care about this job, right? So doing the bare minimum to apply to it, if you're going in there with many other candidates, they're probably going to filter you out based on that, right?
Yep.
And I can already hear what people are thinking or saying about this, because it feels like on some level you shouldn't have to do this. You're a fully qualified person. You should just say, hey, I'm fully qualified. I'm applying for the job. That should be enough. And you're right. You can do the job, you know, but the problem is that you're going in through a channel with hundreds of other people, and a lot of them are fully qualified for the position too. So the question becomes, well, why should we talk to you instead of all these other people that applied that are also fully qualified? And some of them have gone above and beyond the minimum that we asked for. And they've made a great case for themselves. They clearly are signaling that they know about what we do here and what this job is, and, you know, what we're looking for. And they're tying that to what they have. And, you know, I mean, who would you pick? You know, you don't know any of these people. They're just names on sheets of paper. Who would you pick? You would pick the people that show the most enthusiasm and are qualified before you go to the people that are technically qualified, but they've just done the bare minimum and they've sent you something totally generic, right?
Right.
And it sucks because nobody wants to take the extra effort, me included. I understand completely, but you know, that's why you should try and do as good of a job you can, and then do as many of them as you can while maintaining a high quality of applications. That's kind of the idea.
Yes. And the idea isn't to have AI do this all for you. You're using it as a tool to make the process a little bit more streamlined and simple for you overall.
Just
So,
like you use spell checker, you know, you
yeah.
don't rely on it to do the whole thing, but it's a tool you use.
Yep. And so it can just streamline and speed up the process for you. But whatever it generates for you initially is the first draft, the rough draft. And then you need to spend some additional time and put some additional effort into it, making things a little bit more personalized, making corrections, identifying things that AI might say or a way that it generates an output that doesn't sound like you, so that it is actually your document. And I think that, you know, there's an argument that it feels fake or cheap or insincere or disingenuine to have AI do this for you. But it's not necessarily about the true content that is in there. It's about that first impression. So, you know, if you're thinking about how you can make the best first impression to really stand out to an interviewer, a recruiter, a hiring manager, to demonstrate that you believe you're the best fit for this position, for this role, for this organization, this team, etc., the amount of effort you put into your application is one of those things. And then some of those like really key points that you've mentioned during, like, in their cover letter or on your resume can help you stand out there. And what's tough about this whole process is that Bill and I can sit here and give you all of this advice and talk to you about this whole process, and then you experience something completely different because the interviewers decide to do it differently anyway. And so that's what's tough about this whole job search interview process, is that there's no set in stone way that we will be able to say for sure you will experience this when you're applying to jobs and when you're interviewing. The advice we're giving you is really some best practices on how to show up to be the best candidate in the eyes of the recruiter, the hiring manager, or the interviewer, so that you can really set yourself apart from all of the other candidates who are applying to the same job. Because these days, when you're applying to jobs, you're not the only candidate. Especially with remote and virtual opportunities, you could be competing against hundreds, if not thousands or tens of thousands of other people. So what can you do initially to really demonstrate that you are a step above all of those other candidates? The amount of effort you put into your application is one of those ways. Having a tailored cover letter, having a tailored resume, spending some time answering some of those supplemental questions if they exist. Those are all ways to really demonstrate that you are different from the rest of the group who has applied to this job.
Absolutely. Skadgi, if I'm saying that right, says overly optimistic with that number of applications. Unemployed people aren't typically highly motivated and efficient. They're discouraged, etc. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, you're absolutely correct about a couple of things here, Skagri. Unemployed people generally are unmotivated and inefficient because they're human, because it sucks. It feels like the entire world has rejected you and is telling you that you have no value. And then on top of that, as if that isn't bad enough, you've got this confusion around like, what do I need to do to get people to take me seriously and consider giving me a damn job? That's kind of like, there's a lot of confusion around how does this work? What do I have to do? And then there's also issues with like doing some things that you would think would work, like obvious stuff, like trying to talk to recruiters and all this kind of stuff. And that doesn't pan out sometimes. So it just feels very confusing. So you're absolutely right about that. It is extremely hard to get the motivation to do something like this, which is essentially the sales process. You're trying to sell yourself when you feel absolutely rejected and dejected by the world. And, your self-esteem is at its lowest point. I mean, it's extremely hard to do. It's not for the faint of heart. And the other thing is that it's not optional. You have no choice. You have to make something happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you're absolutely right. And I think both of us sympathize with that entirely. I mean, I can empathize with that, and I don't want to speak for Abby, but I mean, I've been in a similar position, so I understand. The thing is that what we're doing is we're kind of trying to, the way I see it, is we're trying to kind of explain what's happening on the other side, right? Because for a lot of job seekers, it's a mystery. You don't know, like, are people even looking at my stuff? And if they are they taking it seriously? And what are they looking for? And how are they reading it? What do they want? What do they want me to say? Like, that's the big mystery. Now, when you say overly optimistic, that with that number of applications, that it can be, it certainly could be for you. But for other individuals, it's clearly not, because they're doing it. Mm-hmm. Now, the question is, how are they doing it? One of the obvious things is, like we've been talking about for quite a while, is they're using AI tools to help them, not to do the whole thing for them, but to help them. Yeah. If you can't throw words together, I suck at throwing words together on paper. I can talk till the cows come home. I can ramble, but I can't write to save my life. Mm-hmm. That's why I think ChatGPT is amazing, and some of the other chatbots like Grok and stuff, because it's amazing. You just babble into this thing in a voice interface, and then you see it just totally turn your incoherent stream of consciousness ramblings into a coherent essay that's well articulated, well organized. It's a miracle. So,
and it only gets better if you are more specific and more detailed.
So so using tools like that, you can use that to tailor kick-ass cover letters, resumes that are entirely tailored to the job you're applying for, that really match exactly what you have to exactly what they said they're looking for, using all their terms so that, it gets past filters and stuff like that. The tools are there. It's just a matter of getting to know them and getting efficient using them. And you do that by doing it. So in the beginning, you're not going to be very efficient at using these things. But if you stick with it and you just tweak what you're doing and try and get more efficient, you can bang out some of these applications very quickly, and they're tailored and they're as good as you could do if you spent like the whole day agonizing about it yourself. Yeah. So it is possible to do.
And I do think, we were talking about 5 applications a day, totally doable, especially if you're full-time job searching. I think, even on the much higher end, like 20 applications a day, if you are applying to a specific industry and your app, like the types of jobs that you're applying to, don't change all that much with key responsibilities, roles, expectations, things like that, you don't have to spend a ton of extra time even using ChatGPT to modify your resume. You may want to have it analyze the last one you submitted and compare it to this new job that you want to apply to and just have small tweaks. But ultimately, you're going to start to have a very similar resume that you submit to multiple types of jobs. It shouldn't be identical because there will be slight differences between each role and each organization. But ultimately, it's going to be a very streamlined process once you get that industry specific resume created or cover letter
Absolutely.
or whatever it is that you're looking at.
Now this is the same individual here says, then it feels cheap slash fake to have AI tailor a cover letter that people like you will read.
Mm-hmm.
If we're lucky to get someone like you who likes them and reads them. First of all, take us out of the equation here. Okay. We're trying to shed some light on the other half of this process, the part that you don't see. Secondly, they said that about word processing. They said that about computers. They said that about spell check. They said that about grammar check. They have said that about every tool that's come out. And this
It
is
feels
just
a
delayed.
lot less personal if it's
Yeah.
not a handwritten cover letter.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so, the other thing is that I've heard the term cheap slash fake used when anyone has to try and sell anything, including themselves. And that's a totally understandable reaction if you've never done this kind of thing before, which most people haven't. However, if you've come up through sales and stuff, you've had to convince anyone of anything, even to include you on a team or include you in a project or even include you in a group of people that goes for lunch together in a workplace. Okay. You need to learn how to persuade. And in order to persuade somebody, you have to engage in saying things that may seem cheap or fake to other people. They shouldn't be fake, and it's certainly not cheap. If you just tell somebody honestly what you have or what you can help with, that's not cheap, and that's certainly not fake. That's all that's required of you in this process. Okay, so if it feels cheap and fake, I think you might be either getting the wrong impression or maybe doing the wrong things. Okay, it's not about lying, it's about saying what you have. It's just that you're saying it in a way that the other person understands, because they might use different lingo. They may not want to know your life story. They might just have 2 minutes to get to know you, or 6 seconds, as we've mentioned earlier. And in that 6 seconds, you have to give them what's honest and what you can actually do for them. So no part of that should be cheap or fake.
Yeah.
Um,
And kind of along those lines, when it comes to assuming that the other person is going to feel like it's cheap or fake, you can't control that. What you
yeah,
can
exactly.
control is the amount of time and effort and quality that you put into the application. And what you control is how you make that feel like you rather than like ChatGPT or Grok put this together for you. So think about what you can control versus what other people are going to be feeling or thinking or assuming about your application. So if I'm going to be writing a cover letter and I want it to be really genuine and feel like me, but I can't come up with the words to describe why I want to work for this organization or why I would be a great fit for this job, it's not cheap, fake, or disingenuine to have AI give me some ideas and pointers on what I might be able to do to really showcase and sell myself to this organization. As long as I then take some time to personalize it and make it my perspective rather than an AI platform's perspective.
Absolutely. We're starting to get more questions now, so thank you to the people who are sending them in. That's great. That gives us a lot to go on. Here's the next one. Someone says, how to make CV to at least get shortlisted to be in the job interview process and not get them moving forward with other people paths. Well, if we trip over the grammar and fall flat on our face, I think what you were trying to say is how to make the CV work so you pass that filter. And the bottom line is that, like we were talking about earlier, most most job applications where you submit your application to a job, it's going to go through an applicant tracking system, and that's a computer. So the computer is going to take your resume, it's going to read it with some kind of filter, looking for keywords or key phrases. Or what's more likely, I believe now, is you've got some kind of AI analyzing it, and then that's going to decide if you move on to the point where it actually gets seen with a human, right?
Mhm.
So what you're really trying to do in the beginning is you're trying to outsmart a machine, give the machine what it's looking for. Now, the first line of that I would say, and then I'll turn it over to Abby to say more sophisticated things maybe, is the first thing you need to pay attention to is on the job posting, what are they looking for? They usually have a section called requirements where they say, we are looking for someone who has this and this and this and this education, this experience, these skills, and so on, maybe these traits. So if that's what they've said they're looking for, that's the kind of thing you want to mention prominently up front in your resume or your cover letter or both, so that they see that first thing and they go, oh, okay, this person looks like they fit what we're looking for. And then they move you on to the next step, which is probably being seen by a human after that. So that's kind of the first step.
Yes, and I am putting in the chat, I've got a whole playlist. It's like got 17 videos on resumes, how to create a master resume, how to create a tailored resume, get your resume through the AI or applicant tracking system. And then I also put a link to my website where I have a free resume template that you can download. When it comes to your resume, in order to get past the computer, you want to make sure that it is not formatted. So you don't want to use a fancy template that has some like hidden code within the document, because
Yeah.
that will confuse the computer that's reviewing it. You want to make sure that you're not using fancy tables or colors or underlining, because if you think about, an underline that connects with a P, the tail of the P and the underline can get connected, which then might confuse the computer system. You would think in this day and age that the computer systems would be smart enough to be able to decipher some of that formatting stuff, but
One
they're
would think, yes.
yes. So you want it as plain and unformatted as possible. And then you want to make sure that it has keywords and phrases from the job posting within the document. Now, for a while, there was this hack going around called, I want to say it was like white listing or
Yeah,
something where
something
you
like
would
that. Yeah.
copy the job posting and you would paste it in like size 0.5 font and then make it white. And it would be the whole job posting pasted into your resume. And then people thought that that would trick the computer system into saying this person has all of the things that we're looking
Well,
for.
it did in the beginning, yeah, but it's
Yeah.
it's open secret now.
Yep. And so now that's like not a thing. So don't do that. But you do want to make sure that you have some of those keywords and phrases from the job posting directly in your document. This doesn't mean that you copy and paste the roles and responsibilities from the job posting into your document, because the recruiter or the hiring manager who wrote the document is going to be able to see from a mile away that that was just a copy and paste. But you want to be able to essentially describe how you can do what they're wanting done in this specific job, while also describing not only how you meet all of the minimum requirements, but also most of the preferred qualifications or requirements. One other thing that I recommend doing is if a degree like education is a minimum requirement for a position, I recommend putting your education at the top of your job posting, because not of your job posting, of your resume. And this is not necessarily to get shortlisted to the applicant tracking system, but when you have a person reading your resume, they're going to be mentally checking off those minimum qualifications first. If you are not meeting those minimum qualifications, you will not be considered for the position. So you want to make it.
What would be other things like that's a good suggestion, because I know not a lot of people suggest that. I've always thought that should be like, you start with your education just because it's so quick. You could say, oh, this is my name, I have a degree in engineering, or whatever. It's like, okay, so that kind of frames what we're talking about. If I imagine if you're applying for a job, if you have direct experience in that job, say 5 years experience doing that exact job, that's also something you would mention front and center, right at the top, right at the
Yeah.
beginning, because that
Yep.
frames like where you're coming from, right?
Absolutely.
Is there
Absolutely.
anything else? I mean, I can't think of anything else. Is there anything else that would be like an obvious thing to put front and center? Like,
It's really whatever those minimum qualifications are. That's what you
yeah,
really want to highlight front and center. So top of mind, I'm thinking education is oftentimes a minimum qualification. Years of experience is oftentimes a minimum qualification. So you want to make it very easy for the person to calculate how many years of experience you have. Now, if you include a professional summary or an objective statement or something like that, then you can literally say, you know, I have X number of years of experience doing this type of work. You can also include that information on a cover letter by just blatantly spelling it out for them. And then other things that come up for me that could be minimum qualifications might be certain certifications, maybe working with certain demographics. I've worked with someone who is in the process of applying to United States federal jobs, and they're wanting to apply to accountant jobs. And one of the requirements for many of these accounting jobs is to have experience with a federal or government-based accounting program. And so if they have that, they should be listing that pretty early on that they've got that type of experience. So you want to make sure that whatever the minimum qualifications are, that you have it front and center, that you meet the minimum qualifications, in addition to the plus of having all of those preferred qualifications.
absolutely. Constantin says, yeah, finding a job is a full-time job. Absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot of work. First of all, there's many different ways to find a job. We've been talking so far in this live stream about the posted job market. So that's definitely a game you can play, but it has its own quirks. There's roughly, I am of the opinion, based on my experience, that it's about 20 to 30% maximum of all the job opportunities out there. There's a lot of others that are not posted. A lot of young people are ignorant to those. If you've never been introduced to those, that's called the hidden job market, simply because those jobs exist and you can get them, and just that they're not posted. But there's many different ways of getting a job. This is just one. So check out some of the others if you've been doing this for a while, because we've got several comments from people so far expressing their frustration and their dissatisfaction with this, playing this game, basically. So just so you know, there's a lot other methods out there. This is just one. So the easiest thing to do is go to ChatGPT and say, what are the different methods of getting a job? And that will get you started. Okay. And that kind of thing. I've done videos on that. I know. Have you done videos on that, Abby? I think you have. Yeah.
Yep.
So check out our respective channels. We talk about this stuff quite a bit. So there's a lot more out there that you can do.
I think one kind of ending comment for that is there's also this like underlying, you and I have talked about it just in the stream already, of like the amount of effort we want to put into our job search. So if I am just applying to jobs online, that is the easiest way to apply to jobs, but it's also the most common and the most competitive. So if I really want to set myself apart from the other people that I'm competing against to get this job, I need to put in extra effort. And that extra effort comes in many different forms: writing cover letters, going above and beyond with your application, submitting transcripts and maybe a portfolio or putting a video together, like going above and beyond that way. But also the networking part. The networking part is probably the most amount of effort over the, a biggest amount of time, but it's the one that will pay off like it will pay off over time, over and over and over again, because you'll be able to rely on your network. You'll be able to make these connections that will be career long for you. People will come in clutch. If you suddenly get laid off, you can rely on your network to ideally find a job much faster, even if it's more of just a temporary holdover until something that is a better fit for you comes along. But it's the one that takes the most effort. And so most people are like hemming and hawing about networking and don't want to do it because it is a lot of work, but it is the one with the biggest payoff.
Yeah, and networking is an umbrella term. It means so many different things. If you're an extrovert, you can network in person. You're in your element. If you're an introvert, you can network from your home using your phone or using a computer or whatever. I built a consulting business, networking from my house using social networking. And the only time I ever went to meet someone was when they're inviting me in, wanting to talk to me, and have personally invited them to a meeting in their office or in some third location. Like they're willing to go to those lengths to talk to me. That's what you can do from your from your house or your home or your apartment, whatever. Just if you know what to do, like who to target and what to say to them. So, I mean, anyway, I want to kind of get away from that, but I want to do this. So I have courses, and one in particular called Get Hired. It's my Get Hired course. It's linked in the description box of this video if you are watching it on my channel, I believe. So check that out. It's basically all my advice in one place. And it covers all this stuff. It covers how to get a job in the posted job market and how to get a job in the hidden job market. And it's tailored to introverts. So if that's you, check that out. All my advice in one place. Now, a common question that I get on a regular basis is I go to job interviews a lot and I don't get the job, but I can't get any feedback. I can't get any information. What am I doing wrong? Am I doing something wrong? Am I not answering questions properly? Or am I just off-putting in some way? And people have that question. And the answer to that question is you're not going to get reliable feedback from the interviewers, because there's a lot of reasons why they're not going to give that out, not the honest, true reason why they rejected you or what they really thought of you. If you want to know the answer to that question, what you can do is you can get a career coach. And Abby is a career coach. I'm not a career coach. Abby is a career coach. So if you're looking for someone to work with you, someone that can do pretend interviews, mock interviews with you, and assess like how you're interviewing and if your answers are good or your body language is good and all that kind of stuff, and get some objective, honest, professional feedback on how you do that stuff, go check out Abby's channel. She has links to her services. A lot of people, as I understand, only get like they might get one session, just one session of 1 hour, and that just on its own can work wonders for helping you improve your interviewing technique, or how to write your resume, how to get your application so that it generates interviews, whether that's a resume or a cover letter. So check out Abby's channel, check out some of her services. I don't want to speak entirely for you. I'll let you add whatever you want to that.
Yes, thank you, Bill. And I've got Bill's channel linked in my description box as well. So if you want to click that, you can have that instant access to his course content. And if you're looking for more specific, tailored interaction, a mock interview, a job search strategy session, something like that, please let me know. The most popular sessions that I have with clients is my interview strategy session. And that's more of a conversation between me and whoever it is that I'm working with about what has worked well in their past interviews, what needs to be improved. We talk about very common interview questions that come up, how they can approach those. I also put together a big document for each of my clients based off of a job that they want to be interviewing for, or that is the upcoming interview, to help them prepare. It covers core competencies and how to build stories around those core competencies that are specific to the job that they're applying to. And I also have some gaps or blind spots that they might want to be prepared to address during the interview or proactively address, because those are concerns that could come up. And a minimum of 30 different interview questions that are tailored to the job posting that they're applying to. And this really helps people feel very confident and prepared for that upcoming interview. And then I have mock interviews as well. And these are pretty popular sessions. They're, people will send me, they have an interview coming up. They'll send me the job posting for the interview, and I will pretend to interview them for this role. I'll ask them between 8 to 10 questions. I record the session so they can go back and watch it. After we do our mock interview, then I give them feedback on their quality of their responses, anything that I may have noticed over our video interview, be it like their body language, their like spacing of their words and their phrases, how long their responses were, things like that. And so that can be really, really helpful data to help you improve your overall interviewing performance and presence for any upcoming future interviews. Now, many times I work with people just for a single session, but oftentimes I will have people come back and be repeat clients of mine to help prepare for the second or third or fourth round interview for a specific position. Or they, need help applying to this specific position, and then tailoring their application for a different type of position. So I do have a lot of repeat clients as well, but many times people only need a single session to truly get the confidence boost and feel comfortable for that upcoming interview or job search that they've got.
Absolutely. So check out some of Abby's services there. They can help you if you're feeling stuck. Next question, we got somebody says, how can one tackle career gaps at the start of a career journey, like only after 1 year? There is a gap of 3 years due to reasons such as medical, etc. How can one rejoin the force even if restart? Do you want to take this one, Abby?
Yeah, so it sounds to me like this person may have been in a job or the workforce for 1 year and then had a 3-year gap due to medical reasons, and now is coming back into the workforce. So there are a lot of things that you likely did during this gap that are also relevant to the job that you would be applying to. Now, if you're applying to a very technical role or something that requires continuing education and things like that, hopefully you continue to do that during your gap, even though you weren't employed. So like, for example, if I was a therapist, that's my background is clinical mental health counseling. I would want to make sure that I'm not going to let my licensure expire or any of my other professional requirements to continue to work in that field. If that happens, then you do kind of have to start over. But so you want to make sure that you're keeping your skills up and relevant, which is likely something you can do even when you're unemployed. You don't need to be employed to do that. And then you want to be able to quantify that on your resume. What I like to do for career gaps is title my experience section or my client's experience section relevant professional experience. And this is kind of a mind trick for the readers, because what it does is it says I'm only including relevant information for this position that I'm applying to, which may mean that I have other information or experience that is just not relevant to the position that I'm just not listing. And it is professional experience. It's not paid experience, but professional experience. So anytime that I may have needed to conduct myself in a professional way. So this could include volunteer experience. This could include taking courses or classes at a university or online or any format like that, as well as paid work. It could be internships, things like that. So if you have any experience that helps you do the job and be successful in the job that you're applying to, even though it might not be paid employment experience, you can still include it in that relevant professional experience section. And maybe I'm switching industries, and so I have a lot of other experience from years past that is just not relevant to the job that I'm applying to, and I'm not going to include it because it's not relevant. So those are a couple of techniques or tricks that you can use when you're applying to jobs after a big gap of employment.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. The key is basically conveying that you haven't just sat on your butt for like a couple of years there and done nothing. You want to convey that, you've been tuned in to this industry, whatever industry it is, and, you've at least been observing or training yourself, in some way. So that's kind of the key.
And if you were in a position where you were doing nothing, then maybe it is the situation where you do need to start more at the entry level side of the employment spectrum. You're not going to jump in and, be a, super tenured manager right off the bat, if that's what you're hoping for. If you did
There's a version to that, isn't there? Like if someone has been just out of it for a couple of years or like I would define a work gap as like 6 months, that's where it starts. I mean, is 6 months a big deal? No, but maybe I think a year definitely would be considered a work gap, but 6 months is kind of a judgment call. So somewhere in there, that's where it kind of starts, Now, would you want to hire someone that's just been completely out of it for that amount of time? There might be some concerns. Now, they might not be major concerns, but you still want to know that this person is kind of tuned into the stuff and they haven't like not thought about any part of this job for a year or something. That I know some recruiters, they believe like if you don't use it, you lose it to varying degrees. I think sometimes that's totally overblown and it's false. I think other times it is true to a degree, but if you can show that you're still kind of tuned in. So the hack for that I've said several times on this stream in the past is just, if that's you've been like out of it for like a year or something, go and take a free course online, just, for a couple of days or whatever, just so that you can say like, look, oh, I wasn't out of work. I went back to school. I've been taking courses on this and this, and I've brushed up my skills, and now I'm ready to rejoin the workforce now that I've updated my skills or something. And you're not lying about anything. You have taken a couple of courses, so you know what I mean. That might be all that you need to say. Hopefully, in a lot of cases, something like that.
Yeah.
Someone says greetings from, is it Raleigh or Raleigh? How do you say that?
Raleigh.
Okay. It's always the opposite of what I think. So, Raleigh, North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole bunch of those names that like I've read, but when I try and say them, it's always like Paducah, Kentucky, things like this,
Mm-hmm.
So it always turns out you'd say it like, no, you say it P-Duque or something like that,
Yes.
Happy New Year to you both. Well, thanks. It's Amazed. Amazed is a regular.
Yes, we recognize Amazed.
And same to you, Amazed.
Yeah, and I'm not seeing any other, questions in there yet. So if you are watching from any of our platforms, Bill's YouTube channel, my YouTube channel, or my Twitch stream that I've got going, please feel free to put any questions or thoughts in the chat when it comes to your job search, interviewing, professionalism, things like that. Bill and I think, kind of have some unique combined experience between the two of us, and would be happy to answer any questions.
Absolutely. Like Abby says, we're here primarily to answer your questions. So hit us with some questions, whatever you got to do with careers, jobs, resumes, cover letters, interviews, networking, all that kind of stuff. I mean, personally, on my channel, I cover more of the networking. I'm more into that because it's not working within a system. It's like you're working outside of all the systems. And that's why, understandably, to some people who are just, they've never been introduced to it, it appears like favoritism, like magic. How come that person got the job? Well, as it turns out, that person went and talked to them. They were looking for somebody to join their team or whatever, and that person was the only one that showed up. They had some of the qualifications. They made a good impression. They were easy to work with, easy to talk to. They were the type of person that these people just want to work with. They were agreeable. So next thing you know, they get picked, right? Now, you may have been more qualified, right? But maybe you didn't go and talk to them. You didn't know that was even a thing. So you didn't get picked. You didn't get picked, not because you're not qualified and you have no value, but because they didn't hear of you. They didn't know of your existence or your desire to be in that role. So, isn't it such a stupid reason to not get hired? You've spent years and years getting the qualifications and the experience, and then someone gets picked over you because they went and talked to the person. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So isn't that such a stupid reason not to get hired? Even if talking to them can start with, you sending them a message. You don't even have to do it in person. And then once they say, oh yes, definitely, I'd like to talk to you, then you show up. A lot of people, they're not comfortable with a cold approach, especially in person, but they are okay if they're like invited in. Someone says like, yeah, sure, let's talk. Then you don't have so much of a problem going to see them. They're expecting you and they invited you in. So you know what I mean? So a lot of introverts, a lot of extroverts, a lot of young people, you can do this. It's really not rocket science. It's just that I find that in high schools and things, they don't really introduce people to this. So you're left to your own devices to kind of learn. This is how kind of things work in the world sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Isn't that the,
I'm told that's falsely attributed to Einstein. So it is true, but he didn't say it. Somebody else said that. Or
yes.
Yeah. But no,
well,
but it is.
So that's the thing, is if you are doing the same thing over and over and over and you are expecting to get different results, but you're not, you got to change something in your process. And so I had a client who just had interviews last week. Haven't heard how they went yet, but this person was applying to be a superintendent with a school district in Canada, actually. And this is going to be the third attempt.
Fine person indeed.
Mm-hmm. This is going to be the third attempt. at moving into a superintendent position, or not a superintendent, a principal position. And she was interviewing with superintendents. And she was ready to give up. She was like, if this doesn't work out this third time, then I think I'm gonna, retire and just be done with it all. And so I asked this person what their process was to prepare. And they would just show up to the interview and kind of wing it with these panels of superintendents who would make the
shoot
decision.
the shit. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so I suggested to this client that instead, interviews hadn't been scheduled yet. She had just applied to the position, and she was trying to be really proactive about preparing for these interviews. The last couple of times she had interviewed, they had been the same format, a panel of people asking very similar questions.
Wonderful.
That sort of thing.
Everyone loves that. Yeah.
Yes. So I recommended that if she knew that this interview would likely be with the superintendents who would be the decision makers, I asked if she had talked to any of those superintendents that work in the district for her. And she said no. I said, well, what's holding you back? Why not? If you know that you want to apply to this position, you're going to be interviewing with these people. You're probably going to be working with them closely as a principal. You might as well indicate now that you're interested in the position, let them know that you applied, and then do an informational interview with them to find out what they're looking for from this person who's going to get this position. What are some of the challenges they're expecting? What are, not only for this person, but for their district as a whole? What, are they looking for specifically when it comes to a successful person who moves into this position? And so she did that. She was able to get through multiple informational interviews with the potential interviewers, not knowing when the interviews were going to happen or who was going to be there.
Yeah, so, that's your due diligence. Absolutely.
Yes. And that is a very different approach than what she was doing before. And it probably gave her some really good insight into what their concerns were and how she could answer questions to really address those concerns proactively, to demonstrate that she is super thoughtful and the best fit for this position that she's interviewing for. And so,
I'd like to capitalize on this, before, like, not to cut you off or anything, but before you go any further, just this far, like, okay, you're talking about, just to recap, you know that you're going to have an interview. It's probably going to be a panel interview. It's going to be several superintendents interviewing you for a job as a principal. So you have some idea of who those superintendents are going to be. So the idea is that, you proactively go and arrange an informational interview with as many of those people as you possibly can. Now, maybe you can't even get an informational interview. You could at least ask them a question over email or something like that. Just say, listen, for this interview, do you prefer this? Do you prefer that? Are you guys more into this? Are you more into that? Are, just, something like that. Is it a good idea if I show up, with a portfolio, or that's not really what you guys are expecting? Something like that. Because if nothing else, if you don't get any actual useful information back, if nothing else, it signals to them that you're interested, you're keen, you care, and you're trying to satisfy them, right? So even before you worry about, did I get anything useful back, you're already sending a signal to them. This person is into it. They're trying to do a good job. They obviously care about getting this position. Other people don't. Most people don't. They don't do this kind of thing, right? Nobody's telling you to do it. This is something you decide on your own initiative because you realize I should give myself the best possible chance. Then if you manage to get information back from them, that's doubly useful. They say, oh yeah, well, we're much more interested in this, maybe where education is going or something. So I mean, that's a particular interest of mine as a superintendent. So, I'm really interested in that topic. You can say, that's great. I'm very interested in that too. I look forward to speaking to you about that in person. Or if you can get a information, if you say, like, I'd very much like to get your opinion on where you think education is going, would you have some time? We could maybe book a meeting or something. I could stop by your office. And a lot of times people will say, sure. And the next thing you know, you're going to see them. You have a wonderful conversation, listening to them and what they think about where education is going. And at the end of it, they go, wow, I like the cut of your jib. You seem to be on the level with this stuff. And, there you go. They've seen some of your value right up front. So when you get to that interview, if you've done that with several of these people, it's probably going to go well. You know what I mean? And that's what Abby's talking about, like putting in that kind of work,
Yep.
and this is the kind of networking that really, really pays off. And that I don't care if you're right out of high school or right out of college, you can do this. I don't care if you're an extrovert or you're an introvert with some basic communication skills, you can do this too. So
Yep.
that's what I want to encourage in people.
And what's great is with this specific example is this person could do an information interview with one superintendent and then use that information to facilitate an even more useful data gathering informational interview with another superintendent. I might have this interview with the first superintendent. And when I say interview, informational interview, where it's like just me proactively reaching out to them and talking to them before the job interview itself. And I find out that there's going to be a lot of budget cuts coming for the next fiscal year, and that we aren't necessarily knowing what that's going to look like and what our priorities can be. I can then take that information and ask the next person that I'm going to talk to, what do you think about this? What do you think our biggest challenges are going to be? What do you think we need to be most prepared for? And then I can take all of this information that I've gained from these multiple informational interviews, and I can use that to inform my responses during the interview itself to show that I've been really thoughtful and forward thinking about some of these major issues that are going to impact me as a principal, my students, my community, my district as a whole. And so it really just demonstrates that you're willing to put in the effort, that you're enthusiastic about the position, that you're forward thinking, that you're proactive. And all of these different qualities are essential to what they're hoping a person will have in the role that they fill.
Yeah. So an example of how that might go, and this is similar to stuff that I've seen and I've done, is Abby's exactly right. So you may do 2 informational interviews, one with 2 of the superintendents. So there's an informational interview with one superintendent and an informational interview with another superintendent. Maybe what you find during those interviews is that you're up for the job of a principal of a school. You've spent a lot of time as a teacher. You have a degree in education. You've been thinking about like different educational theories of how to best teach different types of learners, that kind of stuff. What you find after talking to the superintendents, they're not really tuned into that stuff. They didn't mention anything like that at all in your 45-minute conversation with them or your hour-long conversation with them. They are simply talking about budget cuts, like Abby mentioned, and how you can get the best possible education while using the smallest possible budget. So looking for things that provide maximum value without needing a lot of assets, a lot of, spending money on things. So knowing this and getting that vibe, you then come to the job interview and they ask you about, what would your approach be to doing this or that? And you'd say, well, I'm very conscious about getting the maximum amount of education for the lowest possible budget. We don't need to spend a lot of money on this. I think that you can do this, which, requires a fraction of that, but yet has the same impact. That's the approach I would take. Now, knowing what these people are looking for, that allows you to do better. And at the end of it, they go, you're the person that we're looking for. You think like us, you're focused on the right things. We like where your head's at. And for that reason, we're picking you as opposed to picking somebody simply for their educational background or their experience as a teacher. Yep. So, that would be an example of how these things go. Anyway, I think I've pretty much cleared the room with this, but it's a great example. More people should pay attention to this stuff.
Yes. And this is an example for an internal interview. So I might have someone's direct phone number or email address or things like that, but you can still do it for an external interview as well. If I know that I'm interviewing for a specific type of job, I might be able to identify who my manager or the director of that department might be and connect with them and have these sorts of conversations with them. And it can be scary when you have no connection, no conversation with them from like past history or anything like that, to just do this kind of cold connection. But if they accept it, you can either have the conversation over email if it's, not really going anywhere, or it could be as impactful as a 45-minute, hour-long phone conversation, Zoom conversation, in-person conversation where you can bring them a cup of coffee and have more not as formal, more informal conversation to really get some insight into what's most important for them so that you can be very intentional about how you present yourself, your skills, and your abilities to do the job that you're going to be applying for or interviewing for well, especially compared to all of the other people who are not going above and beyond like this.
Absolutely. We have 15 minutes left. Let's get to some of these questions, some more of these questions here. Somebody says, hello, I'm a junior in college and I have an interview for financial specialist role at Navy Federal Credit Union. There will be 8 people at the interview. Any tips? I'll let you handle that one, Abby.
So I am trying to find my video on panel interviews. I've got a whole interview or a whole thing about panel interviews. And really a panel interview is not much different from a individual interview. The only difference is that there are multiple people involved. And so you'll be getting questions from various people, or they'll be sitting back kind of listening to the primary interviewer, kind of what to expect from that. But you should approach your preparation very similarly. You want to make sure that you practice questions, that you think about the core competencies. What I recommend doing that you might not do with an individual interviewer is do a lot of digging on who these people are and why they're in this interview and why this interview matters to them. So if I know that I'm going to be having an interview with the recruiter plus the hiring manager, who is my future boss, plus a coworker or colleague, plus the director of the department, all of those people have different reasons for wanting to be in this interview. And so I want to make sure that I'm being really cognizant of how I'm approaching my responses and tailoring them to the people who are in the room. If I'm going to be interviewing with my direct supervisor, the way that I respond to questions and the questions that they ask me are probably very different from the way that I might respond or answer questions from colleagues, who my future peers, or people that might be key stakeholders that I'll be working with. And so you want to understand who is going to be in the room and do some, kind of self-reflection as to why they're in the room. Maybe if you're working with a recruiter, they can give you some insight. You're going to be having the CFO in this because they want to know how you're going to handle this budget deficit. Okay, that makes sense. Otherwise, you might say, why would the CFO be sitting in this interview? Why does this position matter to them? So do some thinking as to why these people are in the room, why it matters to them. The reason why organizations typically choose to do a panel interview is because it's much easier to get people in one room at one time than scheduling 8 different individual interviews. And you get to spend 1 hour of time talking to these 8 different people rather than 8 hours or 4 hours of time talking to these 8 individuals as individuals. So I don't really think that panel interviews are much different from individual interviews, but it does feel a lot more high stakes because you have more eyeballs looking at you. But prepare for this interview as you would any other type of interview. And I'm going to put this video that I have, the panel interview secrets video that I've got in the chat right now.
Yeah, don't be intimidated by these people. Like Abby says, it's just the same thing as a one-on-one interview, just scaled up a little bit. For you, it works exactly the same. The only trouble I have with panel things, the only thing that complicates it, is trying to remember people's names and get straight who they are. And I don't know if you have the opportunity of doing this, but the best way is, to get their business cards. If you have a business card, that would be ideal. If you don't, you might consider getting one. You pay the equivalent of literally $20. You can have them printed online and shipped to you. But you just take out your business card, you give it to them, and then they instantly take out their card and give it to you. And then you put those on the table. If you're sitting at a table with 8 people on your side, you put the cards like that around you. And then you can see, okay, that's John, that's Francine, this is Jack, like whatever. And you see their titles, who they are. You're the recruiter, you're the CFO, you own the company, like this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. It's Amazed. Amazed says, less than a year into a new role where I'm underutilized and underemployed. My skills aren't being fully optimized. How would you recommend addressing this when interviewing for a new role? Listen, that describes, I think, most people that have jobs, that they're underutilized, underemployed, or it's just very inefficient. Um, it can lead to a lot of personal dissatisfaction. Um, I would say that, like, to try and answer this exact question, how would you recommend addressing this when interviewing for a new role? If they ask you, why did you leave your last role? There's something you can say that's pretty benign and say, like, I'm ready to do something new and, really be able to contribute, to take all of my skills and contribute that to generating value, and
Yep.
being utilized properly. I have a lot of capabilities. That would be an obvious example where you could use that.
Yeah, and I think really you want to turn it into a positive thing for this new role. So I decided to start looking for this new role because with this organization doing this type of work because I am excited about the challenge that it presents to me. I'm looking for the ability to take on some additional responsibilities or use my skills in this way, and this role is a perfect fit for that. You don't dwell on the past position. You don't talk poorly about it. You just kind of describe that this new position is actually going to set you up for being more successful and providing more value to the organization that you're interviewing with than your current position is.
Absolutely. Someone says, how to explain that you got laid off in March and weren't technically working since, investing, etc. Well, I would, that's a work gap, right? And we've talked previously in this session about current work gap, how you justify it. Bottom line is what I would say would be to take a couple of quick courses, and then you can, like, online free courses, and then you can frame it as like, oh, I haven't been doing nothing looking for a job. I went back to school, and now that I brushed up on my skills and I've brought my skills up to date, now I'm ready to rejoin the workforce, and that's why I'm here. That's what I would do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you are working, you said investing, et cetera, is what you were doing. You weren't technically working. Really, using your resume, you can say relevant professional experience, and then you can also somehow quantify the experience that you got while you were investing or whatever it was that you were doing, and you can have that be on your resume as you can, like, say freelancer or like independent investor. You can kind of title your experience that way and list the things that you did, because if you're working in any type of role, paid or unpaid, there's probably certain things to your day and responsibilities that you have to keep track of. So you think of all the things, all the skills, all the things that you did to be successful in what that was during your gap, even though you weren't technically employed by someone else. Just because you weren't bringing in a paycheck from an external or other employer doesn't mean that the experience that you had during that time that you were unemployed was truly not advantageous to this new role that you're applying to.
And as I've mentioned a couple of times, I'm rather cynical. So I'm also less emotionally intelligent than Abby is. So Abby probably can make sense more of what you mean by investing, etc. If that means that you were investing during the gap, that's what you've been doing, or that's an assumption that they might make or something. I'm not sure. But here's what I think, if you're going to somebody higher up, is the fact that you are looking for a job. That means you are not a serious investor. You're not, like, doing it at a high level. So the problem with that is that, okay, you still need a job. So investing is a hobby, right, for you. That's the assumption I'm making based on your situation. Then the investing thing can work against you, because if you're doing something on the side, let's say you have your own business on the side instead of like an investing kind of operation on the side. A lot of employers, and you can tell me what you think, Abby, a lot of employers will regard that as a con, as a disadvantage, because they think, oh, if we hire you to work for us, you've got your own thing going on the side that you have a loyalty to that. That's maybe making you a little bit of money. That's really where your heart lies, because it's something of yours that you choose to do. So your loyalty is going to be split between us and this other thing you got going. And for that reason, there might be a conflict of interest. So we might not want to hire you for that reason, because it might lead to some issues. We don't know, but it ups the risk factor. So saying the investing thing, if it has nothing to do with the job that you're going for, might not be the best idea. It
Mhm.
might count against you, depending.
It could. Yeah, it certainly could. I'm lucky because the people that I've worked for from an employer perspective, while also having and maintaining my business on the side, have been really positive with that. They, the employers are wanting someone who has that entrepreneurial mindset to achieve, within the organization and connections and marketing and like all those things. So I've been lucky that my employers haven't um, kind of stigmatized me in that way, but there are certainly employers who may. And so it all
Yeah.
depends on the industry that you are applying to, how you present the information. If it is networking and building relationships with people, if it's analyzing certain things, you don't want to describe it in a way that is, this is going to take away from my ability to focus on the job. You probably, if I were going back into the workforce, to work for an employer, because I'm now fully self-employed. But if I wanted to work for an employer after this, I would probably say, I'm looking for something with more consistency and stability. And while I've really appreciated my experience that I've had over the last couple of years with my own business, I believe that those skills that I've obtained during that experience will really help me be successful in this new role. And kind of, again, similar to the response that I had about amazed, feeling underemployed and underutilized, you don't focus much of your time on what you were doing in the past. You focus on how that will help you be really successful and provide value to this new role and the employers in the future. And you kind of skip over unemployment, being laid off. Like a lot of those details shouldn't matter to them. They might ask it just as like to fill in some gaps that they're wondering about, but you want to skim over that, give them as little information as possible, and really focus on the benefit and the value that you can provide to them based on the skills and experience that you have.
Absolutely. We have Karina Martinez says, looking to go for one career with over 20 years of experience into a completely different career path, specifically law into pharmaceutical sales. Any suggestions how to proceed? Well, the blanket advice I would have for that is hidden job market, because usually when people change careers, that's how they do it. It's very hard to change careers by applying to a posted job, then going to talk to a recruiter, and the recruiter is looking for someone who has, a certain number of years of experience doing this kind of work. And by definition, you won't have any experience in pharmaceutical sales if you're moving to it. So what you're basically looking for is for someone to give you a chance. And the way, a common way, probably not the only way, but the common way to do that is to go and talk to somebody in pharmaceutical sales or in pharmaceuticals, one-on-one. They can see that you're an awesome person. You're very easy to deal with. You're very professional. You're very passionate about doing this kind of work. You have a lot of the personal traits and things that one would need to do it. You seem trustworthy. You seem, you've got a lot of great traits and abilities. And then based on that, and possibly, your previous experience, they may decide to give you a chance,
Mhm.
right? Because they know you, they've met you. Now, you're not getting the job based on your resume. You're getting the job based on your personal interaction with them. And that can get your foot in the door, at least so that they maybe give you a chance. And then if you can then deliver the goods on, on pharmaceutical sales, then you're in, you know what I mean? And then you can climb the ladder, and your past experience doesn't matter. You're in pharmaceutical sales. So that's kind of the more traditional way of switching careers. It's not done through responding to formal job applications. That's what I would say.
Yep. And if you are in a position where you do need to apply to a role, then you want to focus on your transferable skills. So, like off the top of my head, I'm not an expert in law, nor am I an expert in pharmaceutical sales, but there are overlaps between those two industries, even though they're very different.
Absolutely.
So you need to understand rules, regulations, compliance. That's something that's similar between both of these. You
Very
probably,
clear communication. Yeah,
yep,
certainly.
yep, you need to communicate well with other people. You need to be able to maybe answer questions, think on your feet. You need to be able to understand something in great detail to be able to explain it to someone who may not be an expert in it.
And appear professional. I mean, that's something that lawyers certainly have.
Yes.
Excuse me.
So
Like in general, yeah,
Mhm.
you guys, you make it look like you're highly professional, highly trustworthy, and you have a lot of expertise and a lot of authority behind what you say. I mean, you can't tell me that you don't need any of that in sales. That's
Right.
industrial sales. That's the name of the game. So that gives you a little bit of an advantage if you're coming from that.
And if you think about it, I don't know what type of law you do, or if you find yourself in a courtroom where you have to sell your side, your case to the judge.
Yep.
That's sales. You have to
Yep.
convince someone else to buy your story and your client's, reasons for why they did what they did or what they're looking to obtain or whatever it is. So there are a lot of things that are overlapping between these two very different industries. So you just have to think about, okay, what does pharmaceutical sales need that I, as someone with a background in law, can provide? And what sorts of things, if I'm looking at this bullet point list of, things that I need to do for this pharmaceutical sales job, what from my background allows me to do that in a really unique way that makes me different and stand out from someone who maybe has been doing pharmaceutical sales before compared to me who has never done it before?
Yeah, this is a great question to end on, because here is a topic that I find actually genuinely interesting. It's like, okay, now I know that there's a couple of different types of law out there. I mean, there's criminal law, there's civil law. I mean, if you're a contract lawyer, you're not doing trial work, as I understand. You're not, not appearing in court and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but let's pretend that you were. Let's pretend that you were a criminal lawyer. Now, it's interesting because Abby said, if you're trying to convince a judge of something, presumably one would use a series of very logical arguments that all build, or statements that all build into a very compelling argument. Now, that's one form of convincing somebody. The jury trial stuff that I've seen just on TV are, they seem to really be very based on emotion. You know what I mean?
A
It's not
great
all about like
storyteller.
pinning logic. Yeah. So you're selling an idea to a jury, and well, let's see if they buy it. Whose argument do they buy? I mean, that's really sales. Like you condense it down to the essence of sales. You're trying to influence people. You're trying to convince somebody and persuade them by using either logic or emotion or both. I mean, that relates directly to sales, and you're doing it in a professional, serious context. So I mean, like if I were in going from a lawyer to sales, industrial sales, I mean, I would probably see if I could make a compelling argument using that angle and saying, like, sales is what I do. I sell to judges and I sell to juries, and the stakes are very high, and I need to be on my A game to do that. And I use all of these tactics to my advantage. They're weapons in my arsenal to do this, So, I mean, that's what I can bring to this, So it seems like
Yeah.
the same thing. There's a lot of transferable skills there.
Yep. Yep. Well, I think, we are at our time to stop, but I do think we've had some good
Yep.
comments that have come in that we can maybe quickly wrap up if you are in agreement, Bill.
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
So the first one that I see is Z-Man 88-D8R. If you've had some virtual interviews and you're waiting to hear back, which can take weeks for the next steps or decisions, should you take another job if an offer comes up, as you could lose the chance if you wait? Yes. Short answer, yes. You never want to put all of your eggs into one basket, because then something could drop and you suddenly have no opportunities. There's nothing that says that you can take a job, or that you can't take a job and then take another one quickly after that. You can kind of use that as a bargaining and negotiation technique. And who knows, maybe you end up accepting a job that you didn't necessarily have it wasn't your priority, your number one preference, but you end up really liking the people and you end up really liking the culture. So I would never recommend not taking a job just because you want to wait for something else, because something else might not ever come.
Yeah, do what's in your own best interest, because that's how they're behaving.
Yep.
You behave the same.
Yep.
So if that means you take a job because it's the only option at that juncture, you
Mhm.
take it. And then 2 weeks later, something better comes along, somebody makes you a better offer,
Yep.
then you could go to your employer and say, can you match it? But most people don't, because then there's issues with that. But
Yeah.
then you just take the second thing.
Yep.
Sorry, no offense, they offered me more, so I've got to go there. So that's how these things work. That's how they're behaving. They're expecting you to behave that way. You behave the same. It's the right thing to do.
Yep. Um,
Um,
the
thank
next
you,
one we see is
Nikesh.
The Red Show. I recently found out that I'm a finalist for a job that I interviewed for a few weeks ago. I thought I was going to get rejected, but now I'm looking forward to preparing for this job, which I'm excited. Congratulations on being a finalist. Um,
Absolutely.
this comment string continues, so it's a little broken up. However, they recently emailed me and said that the hiring process is delayed. Allegedly, it's a budget issue. I'm bummed, but my city, San Francisco, is currently having this issue with some organizations. The next comment is,
They don't have a monopoly on that either. That's more universal than you think.
yep. Besides continuing to apply for jobs, I feel like this is the one and I have a good feeling about it. Should I keep in touch with the organization for updates without sounding annoying? Yes. I would say why not?
Absolutely. Yeah. No
Yeah.
harm in that.
Yeah, if you're a finalist and they are seemingly excited about you and you are excited about them and you feel like this is a job that is worth continuing to kind of just say, I'm still here, I'm waiting around, that's great. Um, at the same time, you don't want to stop applying to jobs, because let's say a budget freeze happens and they never end up getting funding for this position, or something crazy happens, you're a finalist but there's one other person who's interviewing that they're also really interested in, and they decide to go with that person, and you stopped interviewing for other positions or applying for jobs. You now are kind of behind the eight ball and have to make up for lost time. So definitely continue to apply for jobs, which I think you said you were already going to do, and you can still stay in touch with the organization. I wouldn't say you have to email them every day or even every week. Ideally, you have an idea of when this budget will be worked out. If you can email the recruiter and say, thank you so much for the update. Do you have an expected timeline of when I might be expecting to hear from you next? Then you can have an idea. If they're like, oh yeah, we'll try to be in touch by next week. If they're not in touch next week, then you email them on the Monday of the following week to just check in. You said you'd be in touch by the end of the week. Just wanted to check in, see how things are progressing. I'm really looking forward to this final interview. Just conversational things that also translates to professionalism in the industry. So if you were in this role and you were interacting with someone that you kind of were waiting on them for something, you wouldn't just send them an email and then never respond. If you needed something back from them, you would follow up in a professional way. You wouldn't be too annoying sending a message every single day, but you would just be that little bug in their ear every once in a while, reminding them that you're here, that you're kind of waiting to hear from them.
Yes, and Femi Williams says, good to know I'm not alone, since I've also been out of work since March last year. It's tough out there finding work, and time sure flies. The gap concern is real. Well, good. Yeah. First of all, you are not alone, Femi Williams. And we did talk about the gap earlier. So presumably you were here for that. That's what you're commenting on. So absolutely learn about that. I think Abby and myself both have videos on work apps and things like this. So you go and watch those and learn all you can. And yeah, just check out all the different ways there are to apply for jobs. If you're doing one method and it's not going anywhere fast, check out some of the others. A good job search campaign is something where you're not doing one thing. You're doing maybe two or possibly three things, because you don't know which from which direction things are going to arrive. So yeah, and then learn all you can. That's the name of the game.
And hi, Femi. Good to see you. And I think that one of the things to remember is that it's usually not personal. You're getting interviews, you're interviewing for these jobs, you feel like you're really crushing it on the interviews, or that the interviews are at least good. And then you get rejection after rejection after rejection.
Yeah, it feels personal, but it's
It
not.
feels
Yeah,
personal. Yeah. And they usually have one job and they have multiple people who are applying for those jobs. And you may have even had an incredible interview and they just had a different gut feeling with the other person who interviewed and they decided to go with them. So many times there's not much you can do to change that. You just have to kind of start to rely on the quantity of applications and interviews you're getting.
exactly. Yeah,
In
luck of the
addition to
draw.
quality.
Luck of the draw is what it is. Random chance. So is that everything? We're kind of getting down to the end here. Hopefully.
Yeah, we're pretty
Um,
close.
hello. You're absolutely welcome, Karina. Darkman Jeff says, I'm currently employed, but I'm casually looking for a next step up in my career. We'll watch the replay. Yes. And we both have resources on our respective channels. So check that out. When I said investing, it could also be something like music production. Thank for all you two do. Well, you're absolutely welcome. Well, I would say Z Man, but I'm sure most people watching will probably say Z Man. So
that's how I would say it.
Yeah. So awesome. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Oh, and Femi Williams says another one. Thanks, Bill. Hi, Abby. Thanks for the encouragement. I do want to give up and stick with Amazon delivery driver job, but I will try and keep going. Yes. Keep going. Femi Williams, you are awesome. You are going to be awesome. Don't worry about it. You will get something. You're where you envision your life going. That's where it's going to be. It's just that it's going to take a while to get there. You know, job search is no different. And there's a lot of things out there besides just looking through job postings. So, you know, just learn all you can, keep up the pressure, keep up the work, and you'll get there. Yeah. We have to sign off now. Thanks to everybody who participated. Check out Abby's channel. Check out her career coaching services. Okay. If you want someone to work with you, to work on your resumes, your cover letters, your interviewing technique, check out her site. Check out my course. My Get Hired course is linked below in the description box if you're watching this on my channel. And we will be back in 2 weeks, 2 weeks from today. Right on. So
February 26th. We'll see you all there.
Absolutely. Take care, everyone, and best of luck.
Thanks, everyone.